the impact of capital into the psychedelic space. So I've got a little thing I've written down so I can hold it in my mind. So pardon my reading. One of the major veins in psychedelic culture right now is the influx of capital and a profit-driven industrialization of providing and supplying psychedelics. There is a lot of positive opportunities this represents, but many people are concerned about the potentially negative impact of this profit-driven industrialization. So being that you're really like, in the front nose of the wake of all of this, because your organization is such a significant one in the world right now, maybe you can give us a sense of your lay of the land of the psychedelic space and the concerns you're holding about the direction the industry seems to be heading.
Wow, huge topic. I have a few things that we have been discussing internally in the organization and with like-minded colleagues across the world. First of all, let me be fully clear. Like, I love being an entrepreneur. I've always have, and it's, I think, an amazing opportunity. So I don't believe capitalism is inherently bad, for example, and I think that's actually a very disempowering position to take. I do think that capitalism brings along a lot of illnesses, and it can and often does empower the wrong set of behaviors. And so I think there are different perspectives I think you can take on the development of the psychedelic space. And one of them is often what you see in many industries, which there's a bunch of people that come together just because they love it. And they come to all kinds of crazy insights and amazing creations. And that's awesome. That's like the early psychedelic space, right? And after a time, other people see what they're building. They want to be part of that. They're not necessarily the first kind of core group that would have found it otherwise if that first group didn't exist. But they're close to the ethos and they're close to the mission. They just want to spread it. And then there's a third group that sees this as an amazing opportunity. They don't really care necessarily about what it does. They see, okay, this is the next cannabis. This is the next, capital play. And so what you get is, with the influx of capital, you see that those who are very good at raising capital or are already privileged with access with capital, they get a seat on the table. They know what to say. They go around, they learn what to say. They don't necessarily have done work themselves. And without having done the work themselves, they might have some understanding. Like, I don't want to discredit anyone's personal experience, but they don't have that deep inner knowing that the first group had. And so there's this dialectic of capital coming in, and those who are good at marketing themselves or good having access, they are the ones who get a seat on the table. And those are not necessarily the same people that know what's best for the integration development of the space. And therefore, because of that incongruence, there's another dialectic where, because of private ownership, there is, if you start a company, often at one point, and it takes a lot of time, like a lot of effort to start a company. It's really a full-time commitment. It takes a lot of you. At one point, people get burned out, for example, or they get an amazing offer to be bought out, all the value they created. And what happens is that ownership changes, and those who get control of a company don't always want to honor the fundamental intention why the company was created. And so what happens is that over time, often in capitalism, the purpose of a company and um, the people who control it have they come at odds. And so the trend towards decision making is, for example, profit maximization versus value creation versus rate of innovation versus honoring past commitments, honoring all relationships. And so you get these companies that are actually kind of sick simply because they just want to mine as much value from their clients, from their teams, from past value that was created. And I think that's going to be a problem in the psychedelic space. And I think this year already you start to see, companies that started with great intentions, great teams, but for some reason or another, they didn't make it. They ran out of money, and so they're bought on pennies on the dollar, and everything they've created that could just be bought and could be used for very different purposes. For example, profit maximization, and that's, I think, how you create a system where the purpose, what I think with psychedelics is, which is to help us awaken, help us to become more responsible beings on this planet, to heal the intergenerational trauma, to understand how deeply connected we are. That kind of stuff is pushed set aside, and the assessment is, okay, how do we make decisions that raises the stock price, or leads to an exit for me as a founder. And that is at odds, I think, with the work. And so, yeah, this has been a very heated debate in our organization, because everything we're creating, like, if that can just be sold, and a few select group of people benefit from that, but everyone else who contributed to it, bear the cost, like, then that system is inherently set up to do harm. And if psychedelics is trying to, figure out how we do less harm, that doesn't work.
I want to maybe zoom in or put a spotlight on something. And that was a beautiful sort of overview. And the spotlight being what goes wrong in your mind, having that you have been running this organization now where you've been supporting, I assume, thousands of people at this point to go through the experience of consuming the truffle food and having a non-medical experience. Right. But you've supported a lot of people through this, right? So you see what has worked and hasn't worked, at least insofar as your experience thus far, right? And what has been necessary for you as an organization, you Synthesis, and also you, Martin. And with that in mind, and considering, okay, so what happens now, the influx of this capital, like you just spoke to, okay, if you decided to just sell your company to, whatever larger investment firm also buys the other psychedelic companies, or whatever it is, or it wants to get bought out by Pfizer or something, heaven forbid. But so what do you see as what exactly, at least in your mind, would go wrong there for the people, not just for the psychedelic space, right? What happens to the culture, but then where do you see as the potential harms of how that kind of profit-driven, profit maximization management will impact the actual people going in for these experiences?
Well, one of the fastest way to increase profit is to let more people in and not really care about what happens to them. And one of the, for example, this is we're as guilty as almost any other company in this, because how many companies are really investing in integration versus the experience? And so there's this, even the business, the way the business is structured is, we're way more focused on getting new capital in for our own self-survival versus continuing building value for those who already provided capital. And so these are ways in decision making that capital relations automatically bring in certain incentives of certain factors that color. And so, it's, and I'm not saying that capital is not important. I think to create a self-sustainable organization, the team needs to be paid well, and we need to keep investing in learning ourselves. And learning as an organization, especially these early days, it's incredibly expensive. We just talked about the legal ramifications of making a mistake. It's because we're so early. It's nobody really knows. There's an analysis, discussion, and those are not cheap on the level that we're doing them. But the risk is, let's say I'm totally burned out, and an investor comes and says, "Here's a big pack of money." Often founders they set up the company in such a way that they could personally benefit the most. And, some team members probably too. And, you've already built these amazing relationship with your clients and trusting, but you don't know that the new owner honors those. And so it's like, where does that capital go to? Does that keep investing into the purpose of the company? And will the previous commitments be honored or not? And often the answer is no. Like, often it's not done with integrity, and often the person that buys it is looking at making a return, and they either want to sell it for more, and that means the prices need to go up, or quality needs to go down. It's that simple. And so, and I think that's the danger of form of ownership that doesn't consider them fully stewards of the work, that believes they can reduce the relationship with the client and the relationship with the team just to their economic status. And I'm not saying you can remove that. I think that's also a mistake, and that's too idealistic. But we need to consider why are we doing this? What is the fundamental purpose? And then we need to protect that. And we need to protect it in such a way that it cannot be undermined in any way, no matter what the incentive is, the financials. And there are ways to do that. People have solved that problem, thank God, because I wouldn't have found out how to do that. But there's ways, and we are in the process. We already implemented the commitment. So the commitment is set. It's just going to take a few years at least to fully mature into that vision. But our course is set, and it's now fixed. So I'm very happy with that.
So maybe we could talk about that more in a minute. Mm-hmm. I assume what you're talking about is this kind of like steward ownership model. I think we were talking about previously in our prep call.
Correct.
But I think I really want to make it feel really palpable for the listeners what the consequences are as to the person showing up to get psilocybin. At Synthesis, it isn't therapy, but broad scale, it's moving towards therapy. And what that will be like if an exclusively privatized, profit-driven clinical model takes over the space, and there's the maximization of profits through hiking prices, minimizing costs, and so on and so forth. And but thinking about how does that apply to somebody who's going in for a psychedelic experience? It's like, well, you're not going to get good administrative care. You're probably not going to get good prep care. You're probably not going to get very well-designed spaces, well-trained peoples, and you might not be able to rely on that organization to hold you in the experience before or afterwards in an effective way. And everything that comes, all the potential of these experiences is very much in how those experiences unfold, leading up to, during, and following. And if all of that is haphazard, if all of that is managed from this, like, how do we make the most money, chances are the way you make the most money is by making sure that the person in there is that the least amount of money is invested in the person actually paying for the experience, right? And this is what's coming to mind. And then if you think about how that'll result just in your experience from what kind of care you'll get, well, I'm just wrapping this out now, it's like, it's evident what direction that's going to go for your experience, and it's likely not going to go well. And if you think about the kind of experience, and this is moving into a more spiritual, maybe metaphysical, what kind of experience is even going to be available to you in this sort of psycho-spiritual context of that kind of an industry, then your premise of stewardship, safeguarding the sacred, it's like, well, is the sacred even going to arrive? Is it even going to be there? What kind of experience are you going to have? Is it really going to actually be the thing that it maybe once would have been before it got taken over by Moloch or whatever? Anyway, so that's my TED Talk. How do you feel about what I just said there?
I don't feel great about that, but it's gonna happen. There's a strategy as a company you can do to maximize profits, and it's gonna happen because some people don't care, but some people don't know better. Some people are driven by the context and the necessity of their lives. Some people are not set up for success or for difference. But what's gonna happen is some companies are they're going to try and find a niche to promote the maximum, let's say, form of well-being while delivering the least amount of it. And that gap, they can exploit that gap.